Hello and welcome back to Eddie Radosevich and the great George Stoya here from the SoonerScoop.com studios. You have not been asked to speak yet, and you should shut up. Until then, we have an intro that we have to get through.
Yes, sir.
How are you doing?
Great. I am great.
Good.
Welcome back to that word.
Well, he's a sleepy boy is what he is. You should have seen the actions that he had in the lobby earlier. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. As we told you, I think that was on Tuesday. We told you that we were going to catch up with everything that Brent Venables had to say in the practice report to kind of start the week. We talked to a bunch of players, or 4 players on Monday. Gavin Sawchuk, Robert Spears-Jennings, J.J. Hester, as well as Dez Malone, the incoming cornerback transfer from San Diego State. All 4 guys seem to be kind of positioning themselves for big roles within this unit this year within the team. So as we kind of work our way into what is the final week of the preseason for Oklahoma, obviously the University of Oklahoma starting school on Monday. Everything will kind of be shifted into the evening hours, which I know that we're excited about. Not really. I kind of like everything in the morning, but neither here nor there. We're kind of used to the normalcy of the students returning back to campus, all that kind of stuff. Anything to clean up from Brent Venables on Tuesday? Because there was a major scrimmage on Wednesday that you've done a little bit of reporting on as well.
Yeah, just, the scrimmage went really well. I think it was a little bit different than the first one, which happened on Friday. It sounds like the offense performed maybe a little bit better. I would still say the defense won the day, but you can check out those full scrimmage notes on Soonerscoop.com. Obviously, a great time to sign up with everything that's going on. But Jackson Arnold had a nice day, threw a couple touchdown passes. It sounds like also still turned the ball over. Jacoby Johnson had a big day. It sounds like he had an interception on Arnold. But overall, it sounds like things are going well. I think there's a little bit of an injury bug going on. Nothing serious. Kind of like what Brent said.
You're 2 weeks into camp. They've been going at it for, I think, 12 plus times now or 11 plus practices.
Yeah, it's physically demanding this time of year. And I think, pretty much every fall camp you get in, 2.5 weeks into it, and it's like, okay, it's getting pretty tough on some of these guys. Again, like I said, nothing too serious. I think some guys on the offensive line, Branson Hickman, Jake Taylor, just a little banged up, didn't participate in the scrimmage. I think there's several other guys. And so I think they're going to be pretty cautious this next week. I know they're supposed to scrimmage on Saturday. It's the alumni barbecue. Former players will be in town for that scrimmage. I wouldn't be surprised if that was more of a lighter scrimmage or maybe even turns into somewhat of a practice instead of a scrimmage just because of some of the guys being banged up. And, I mean, we are, 15 days away from them actually playing a game. So they definitely are going to try and be careful.
I know the weather outside feels like it. I'm always kind of cold. That's why I have a long sleeve shirt on today.
You're crazy.
Pullover. Well, come sit in the radio booth sometime. It is literally frigid in there. I'm going to get frostbite someday. Just in terms of, we won't get into like everything from the scrimmage, but we did kind of overlap, and we talked about this a little bit on the Unofficial 40 today with Kerry Murdoch and Josh McQueeston. It just seems like from an offensive line standpoint, I know that there's a couple battles here and there, but it does seem like you're starting to get a better idea of, okay, maybe this is what the 2 deep's going to look like. Maybe this is what they're going to do if you were unfortunate or unable to get a Jake Taylor in the first game. Maybe you get a Spencer Brown, or how everything kind of, it seems like everything's coming together a little bit, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Somewhat. I still think
there's confusion, or not confusion, but there's still like some question marks for sure, but maybe just like the number of guys. This guy's going to fit in here. This guy's going to fit in there. Yeah,
I mean, to me, Jacob Sexton and Fabechi Wiwu are the 2 guys that you can definitely slot in as starters. Sexton, I really think it's going to be at guard the way things are going. He's still getting some reps at left tackles, playing quite a bit over there. Heath Ozeta getting some reps with the first team at left guard as well. But I think that, you look at Michael Tarquin, he's had a really solid camp. I think his veteran leadership has been, very good so far for that group. I think he's been solid. So he's over at left tackle right now. You've got Sexton at left guard. Center's a curious spot right now just because Hickman's now banged up. Everett still isn't back practicing. Josh Bates has done a nice job. Josh Iasosa got a lot of first-team reps in the scrimmage on Wednesday. I think that's just a product of them saying, hey, right now we got Bates is kind of really the only guy that's healthy that they feel like is ready to start. So I think they held him back a little bit in the scrimmage. Josh Iasosa has also performed really well. And so I don't anticipate him starting for Oklahoma come August 30th. But it's one of those situations that you just have some guys banged up there. Right guard, like I said, Fabechi, and then right tackle. if Jake Taylor's ready to go August 30th, kind of like Hickman, I expect him to start that game. But if he's banged up, which it sounds like he is a little bit banged up right now, I think Spencer Brown, a guy that didn't have a good spring, flat out did not have a great spring, but has done a lot better this fall, and I feel like they would feel pretty comfortable with him playing that right tackle spot. And if he doesn't perform well, you can always bump Jacob Sexton over there.
Sure, it's going to be kind of interesting over the next 15, really truly probably the next week.
But that's about 8 guys, right? Like 8-9 guys that I mentioned. That's where I think you can kind of say, okay, it's somewhere in that group.
Starting to center in on some guys, at least that are going to be some part of that 2 deep, whether it's some overlap with some guys that are moving around, they can play multiple positions. It should be interesting. All in all, though, sounded like it was a good scrimmage, good bounce back for Jackson Arnold coming off of the Friday experience that I know caught headlines, but we covered that on Tuesday, as well as the confirmation that Jaden Gibson is going to be lost for the season. Unfortunate situation with him. I think we don't need to rehash everything that has been there with Jaden Gibson. It's unfortunate. It's kind of heartbreaking to see his season come to an end. But on the flip side of that, we talked about this on Tuesday, it does kind of open a window of opportunity. And somebody like a J.J. Hester, who we talked to on Monday as well, just in terms of he's another guy. He's familiar to the rehabilitation process, right, coming in. And really, it doesn't seem like it's gotten his career going in Norman. But it certainly seems like towards the end of spring, you saw him in the red-white game make a couple receptions. And really, truly, through the entirety of this first part of the preseason, sounds like he's kind of picked up where he left off.
Yeah, he's had a good fall camp. Had a good practice on Wednesday. I think him and Arnold have some of a good connection there, and I think part of that's because so many guys have been out. When you think about Andrell Anthony, obviously Jaden Gibson going down for the season, Nick Anderson hasn't been fully available through practice. Again, one of those guys that's a little bit banged up. I think they're being cautious with him. Jalil Farouk's coming back from injury. Deion Burks, obviously the playmaker that he is, I think he's going to be a huge part of this offense. But all those other guys, being out, I think it's kind of opened the door for J.J. Hester, and he's made some plays. Now, I don't think J.J. Hester is going to go out and, have 500 yards receiving and 5 touchdowns this year, but could he be the 5th or 6th guy, in that wide receiver room? I think so. Like, I think that his athletic ability, his speed, and then his height gives him, some versatility to do some different things. He's also a 5th-year guy. I know he hasn't played a ton at Oklahoma, but he was productive at Missouri. I think he's somebody that could come in and maybe give you just some snaps in a game, especially early in the season. Like, if some of these guys aren't healthy, I especially think J.J. Hester's somebody that you can say, okay, we know he can go out there and catch some balls for us.
Here is J.J. Hester speaking with the media on Monday, just kind of talking about the road to just getting back onto the field in Norman, and then, of course, the opportunity that lies ahead.
It's been going great. It's just great to be back out there with my brothers, great to be healthy, and, fall camp overall has just been a blessing.
You mentioned that. Brent said the only thing that's really held you back is injuries, but otherwise, it's been a really good fall camp for you. Just how confident and how healthy are you feeling?
I'm feeling 100%. It took me a while to get back to this, but overall, it's been going great, and I'm just blessed to be back on the field.
Was there a point where you felt 100%?
Around the end of spring, coming into the summertime, that's when I started feeling 100% all the way. So, I'm just stacking on days and building off those days right there.
The room's starting to get hit with the injury bug a little bit. How much are you looking forward to making an impact this year?
I'm looking forward to making a big impact. When one man goes down, the next is up. That's what our coach preaches a lot, and, he has everybody ready to go if anybody goes down in the case.
How tough is it to see Jaden go down like that? He had such a big spring.
Man,
expectations from this year.
Jaden Gibson was going to have a big season, and it's a bummer just to see him go down. Just to see somebody with such high of a character go down like that, it was a tragedy. But just knowing him, I know he'll bounce back 100%. So we have high faith in him, and
6'4", 200. I mean, you see some of the clips there from the red-white game. He is a big body, and who knows? Like, maybe I'm too optimistic when I say get him out there, let him make a couple plays, and all of a sudden maybe you build a little bit of confidence and you get a guy that could be a bigger part of this offense than maybe we think today.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, Jalil Farouk, Deion Burks, Nick Anderson, those are going to be your 3 top guys this season, barring injury to those guys. Andrell Anthony, I think, will eventually get into that mix. But then you have a group of guys after that you're like, well, if they can go out and play well, especially early in the season, that'll create some more opportunities for themselves later in the year. I think J.J. Hester's in that group. I think Brennan Thompson's had a really good fall camp, somebody that can really take the top off of a defense and kind of do some different things with his speed. Jaquez Petaway, I think, is going to have a bigger role this year. And then you get into the freshmen, Zion Kearney, Ivan Carrion, Zion Raggins. Like, those are guys that Brent Venables talked about the other day. And Brent kind of named everybody in the receiver room when we talked to him the other day. But I do think that some of those, like one of those guys, of the freshmen, if they can assert themselves early in the season, maybe they could get a bigger opportunity later down the line if some of these guys aren't able to either take advantage of that opportunity or get hurt later in the year. Because, look, guys are going to get injured throughout the season.
Right.
Especially when you look at some of the injury history of some of these guys. At some point, somebody else is going to have to step up. And so you wonder, can it be a guy like J.J. Hester, a fifth-year senior, or could it be like a true freshman like a Zion Raggins, who I know the coaching staff really likes?
Yeah, absolutely. Zion Raggins might be one of those guys that just simply has too much speed to keep him off the field, which is, it's going to be kind of fun to see how all that comes together.
Too.
And, like we've talked about the wide receiver position quite a bit, obviously, and even going back into the spring, it seemed like all the post-practice stuff or the practice reports that we talked about during the spring were like, Deion Burks did this. Haven't really talked a whole lot about him, but I think simply put, as advertised, he's been exceptional for Jackson Arnold here in the first part of the preseason.
It's one of those things that it's not that we haven't heard about him. I think everybody just knows, like Deion Burks had a great practice today.
He's kind of seen as a little bit of a returning starter, if you will, even though he hasn't played it down at Oklahoma. Yeah,
and to be clear, like we've heard great things about him.
Sure.
The Wednesday scrimmage, he caught a long touchdown pass from Arnold. And he made some big plays, big explosive plays. He's one of those guys that, again, I have never been more confident in saying I think that he's going to be OU's leading receiver next year.
From day one, he's going to step up. And, it is kind of interesting when you talk about the running back room. We've talked about Jovantae Barnes, and it sounds like he had another really good scrimmage on Wednesday. I don't know if we want to have the conversation of, all right, who's going to be the number one back, but I think that we are starting to get the idea that you have Jovantae Barnes back to what we thought he was going to be a year ago. And certainly Gavin Sawchuk from a year ago was a guy that when you look at the last 5 games of the year, he goes over 100 yards in all 5 of those games. He was kind of a rock for Oklahoma, and particularly out of the backfield last year.
Yeah, I mean, I like both those guys. And Gavin Sawchuk, what he showed at the end of the season, I mean, he was really good. I think it was 5 straight 100-yard rushing performances, and a large part of that.
Part of those, he had some big runs too. A 60-plus yarder in the Alamo Bowl, a plus
the big
36
one against
in
OSU.
Stillwater, or the 60-yarder against OSU, and then the 40-yarder against Arizona in the Alamo Bowl.
Yeah, he was really good, and so I think that he's another guy battled injury early in the season last year. Sounds like he's really starting to hit his stride. And look, I don't think they have a Joe Mixon in that room or a Samaje Perine or something like that. At least not yet. Maybe one of those young guys could emerge as something like that. But if your 1-2 punch is Gavin Sawchuk and Jovantae Barnes, that's pretty damn good. I mean, it kind of reminds me of almost like a Trey Sermon and Kennedy Brooks. Like those were two, were they great running backs? No, but they were both really good. In that 2018 season, I think it was.
I'm not trying to tell you Kennedy Brooks was a great college running back.
Yeah, he was. And I think Jovantae Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk can maybe enter that same category. So, I think both those guys are really hitting their stride. And that's the one thing about the offense, Eddie. We've heard they've had some ups and downs. The one thing that has made, kind of stayed the same and been very consistent is the running game. And I think that's been somewhat of what they have on that offensive line. Like they're very good on the interior. They want to run some zone schemes, which obviously benefit those, center guard type players. But then also, I think Jovantae Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk are really understanding the offense, seeing the holes, making good cuts. Like I think that those two have done a really, really good job. And then behind them, I think some of the young guys, Xavier Robinson is a name that's come up recently as a true freshman. But I definitely think it's Gavin and Jovantae leading that group, and maybe we'll finally see that 1-2 punch that we thought we were going to see a year ago.
We talked to Gavin Sawchuk on Monday just about his role entering his 3rd year in Norman, as well as kind of being alongside Jovantae Barnes and kind of bouncing things off of him as far as the development and the maturation and whatever went into last season for Jovantae Barnes. So here is Gavin Sawchuk just kind of talking about everything in the running back room on Monday.
Yeah, well, we had a lot of guys leave and, just trying to take on a leadership role, but still competing for jobs. Everybody's hungry. Everybody's, nothing's promised to anybody. So out there competing, taking on the roles, stepping up as a leader wherever I can, trying to be that for the team wherever I'm needed, and then just fitting in where I can.
What do you think you've learned in your time here going into this season, and kind of what are you looking to do?
Yeah, I think just learning the importance of team, learning the importance of having somebody that's a leader, having somebody that can you can rely on, fall back on. That trust factor is really important. That's something that we've been emphasizing as a team. Is just how can we grow as a team? How can we mesh well together? How can our leaders bring everyone together? It's always about player led, not coach fed. Player led teams are the ones that go the distance. So that's what we're emphasizing. Yeah, just like you said, getting a little bit bigger, putting on a little more weight, continuing to be explosive, continuing to be fast, making guys miss in the open field, and that's just stuff that I'm continuing to work on. Camp's a great opportunity. You can only really work on those things when you're out there on the football field, going against other guys. So just having those opportunities, those team sessions, those one-on-ones, whatever it may be, the opportunities to be able to use those skill sets to be able to make things happen. Like that's what I'm trying to do.
Last year was obviously pretty tough for Jovantae. He's almost like a new guy this year, kind of a new lease on life, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, he's been battling through a lot of adversity, and that's one thing about Jovantae. He battles, he fights. He's a hard worker, no matter what it is. He's going to go out there and give 110% every single time. So he's been working hard, he's been grinding, he's been looking really good. So I'm happy for him. I know he's been through a lot. Finally things are coming into place, and he's taking advantage of everything he's doing.
Has there been a moment on the practice field, or maybe even off the field, that was like, I think this guy's kind of back. He's back to where he was.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he's the same guy every day. He's consistent. He, hard worker. He's going to bring that same effort, that same energy every day. So, just being out at fall camp alone, seeing him back into his groove, back into doing his things, it's just been great. I'm excited for him. I'm happy for him, and it brings also another level of competition.
Sure.
Just having different backs in there, and he's a great teammate as well. So supportive of other people, helping them out whenever they need anything. So he's been great. Yeah, they're just I'd say they're creative. They're creative in getting people the ball that are making plays. So whether that's me, whether that's anybody else on the team, they're creative in finding ways to get them the ball. So I love that. Putting up matchups. So to help us in the run game or the pass game, whatever it may be, they've been creating a lot of different matchups and opportunities for us to succeed as an offense.
2 weeks into this now, does it kind of feel like this is going to be, I don't know if it's like by committee is how I would say this running back room looks, but I do think that you start looking at Gavin, obviously, and then Jovantae. It'll be interesting to see how much they're willing to use a third running back in this rotation, whether it be Caleb Hicks or Taylor Tatum. As you said, Xavier Robinson has turned some heads, especially here in the scrimmage on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll have a third back. I think it'll be certain situations or schemes, right? I mentioned earlier in camp, Taylor Tatum was somebody that they like to maybe move around in the slot,
right,
or come in on a two-back situation, which I do think you're going to see more two-back situations. But I think in terms of running the football, it's going to be Gavin Sawchuk and Jovantae Barnes carrying a large part of that load. I think that Caleb Hicks has had a really good fall camp. We'll see. I think that for him to get on the field more, he'll either have to show something early in the non-conference that maybe he has a little bit more juice than that we know or that we've seen, or somebody get banged up. And the reality is, and I mentioned it earlier in the wide receiver room, but especially in the running back room, it seems
happens.
like every year there's somebody that gets banged up at some point in the season. It felt like every year it was Marcus Major every single season.
Right.
But there's a good chance one of these guys is going to get a little banged up at some part, and somebody's going to have to step up. Last year's Tawi Walker that kind of asserted himself early in the season because Jovantae Barnes was clearly not himself. Gavin Sawchuk had the hamstring issue, so I think that they feel really good about those younger guys. It's just with Barnes and Sawchuk being their third year now at Oklahoma, I think that those guys being the veterans they are and the good players that they are when they're healthy, I think as long as they're feeling good, they're going to be the ones out there.
Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Talk to Robert Spears-Jennings on Monday. And, I think that we've been pretty open about this. If you're talking about a player that you could buy stock on right now, I think there's a lot of people that would with Robert Spears-Jennings. And I think you saw it at the end of last year. The light kind of comes on. He'll talk about it here in a second. But it's just added depth to a safety position that is already in pretty good shape when you're talking about Billy Bowman, Peyton Bowen, that type of stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting what that depth chart looks like at safety, because I think that Billy Bowman, Peyton Bowen, and Robert Spears-Jennings are all very good players. And, that safety spot, you can kind of play both positions. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they have these, schemes where Billy Bowman's out there with Robert Spears-Jennings, and then he's out there with Peyton Bowen, and then maybe even Peyton Bowen and Robert Spears-Jennings are out there together in some formation, and maybe Billy Bowman plays the cheetah or something. Like, I think that they can do a lot of different things because all three of those guys are very, very talented. But I think the big thing with Robert Spears-Jennings is he is probably their most physical safety, right? Like, when you look at him, he looks like a linebacker out there. I mean, I think he weighs the same amount as Kip Lewis and is just able to run all over the field. I think he's good in coverage, but he's especially good in the run game. And I think back a lot, Eddie, to that Oklahoma State game. He came in. That was kind of his first real playing time, meaningful playing time at Oklahoma. And he comes in and stuffs the run on 4th and 1. Like, and that's the type of player he is. He likes to get his nose in there, and I think that he is like a Brent Venables made player, right? Like, he is perfect for what Brent Venables wants to do, and I think that he's always had that ability, but now getting into his 3rd season with the opportunity that he has, like, it's really starting to mentally, like, because I think athletically it's been there, right? He was a standout at Broken Arrow in high school, played both sides of the ball. I think mentally now he really understands what they're asking him to do, and I think he's going to play a lot this year. Again, I don't know if he's going to be the first safety that runs out there with Billy Bowman come August 30th. It wouldn't shock me at all, but he's certainly going to play a lot of football for Oklahoma this year.
First time I saw Robert Spears-Jennings was up at it was about this time of the year during the scrimmages going into his senior year, and he lit it up at wide receiver. Yep. An outstanding athlete. We did talk to him on Monday just about the comfort entering his 3rd year in Norman, and this secondary, and especially the safety group, particularly guys that he's kind of been under the tutelage of in Billy Bowman as well as Peyton Bowen.
It helps all around because you know that if you're not working hard and the next guy behind you working hard, it's a fair opportunity and competitiveness. So, like, if you ain't working hard, the next man is, your spot's gone. So it just makes everybody work harder every day and push each other every day. And it's not like no sabotage group. Everybody loves each other. Everybody's rooting for each other. So that makes a big thing too. It's just my 3rd year, so the defense is kind of the same, and it's kind of easier now. So, like, just knowing it's easier and it's clicking for me, and I know my job, and I'll put pressure on myself to learn everybody else's job around me.
Did you have a moment where you realized that your process went really quickly and not really able to think about it?
Probably at the end of the season last year, I feel like everything was clicking for me. I was thinking faster, moving faster, and feeling very good about myself.
How has Zach Alley helped in, the processing of this defense and everything?
He's helped tremendously. Like, he just shows us how he had his old guys playing, and he kind of like made it easier for us, categorized everything for us, and just made it 10 times easier.
Seeing Billy's game grow every year, but how has it grown from last year to this year? Because it seems like he's really fine-tuned things.
He knows this is last year, so it's like very like emotional and he just cares a lot for this team. So he's just showing it to everybody else that he cares, and he's pushing everybody else because he cares so much, and he wants his last year to go out with a bang. He's a ball player. Wherever the ball is, he's gonna go find it. So, like, just knowing Peyton Bowen's gonna go find the ball, and he's just an athlete. Like, he does some crazy things, and you be like, wow, like that's a play right there. And he's just a dude for sure.
How comforting is it to have a guy like Peyton who can kind of play both safety spots behind, along with you and Billy as veterans?
It helps us all because now we're just trying to hoop. We're all trying to hoop with each other. We're all trying to play hard for each other, and knowing Payne's like a glue. Payne's the glue. Like, he knows every position in the back 7. So does everybody else. But he puts it all every week.
A lot of returning guys to that secondary, obviously, when you talk about Billy or you talk about Peyton, even Robert Spears-Jennings. One of the new guys, though, that joined the Oklahoma program during the spring was Dez Malone from San Diego State. And we talked about it this week on the Unofficial 40, but when you just talk about one position group and just kind of the reformation or whatever it has happened in there, you can look at a lot of different variables in terms of what Oklahoma's going to put out on the cornerback position. Dez Malone seems to figure in that group, though.
Yeah, I think when we think back to the transfer portal, back in December and January, and, OU added a ton of offensive linemen, and they added Deion Burks, and there's all these guys on offense that you were like, oh, man, like these guys are really going to help Oklahoma out this year. I feel like Dez Malone almost kind of got forgotten about. Sure. And if I remember correctly, he was one of the first players, I believe, to transfer to Oklahoma in the portal and in the winter portal. This is a guy that a lot of schools wanted, and a guy that I think could start at a lot of Power 5 programs. And to have him in your cornerback rotation is exceptional because look, we all kind of have Gentry Williams and Woody Washington penciled in as your starters, and that's great. Like, those two guys played a lot of football, very high caliber players. But when all of a sudden you're bringing Kani Walker and Dez Malone, off the bench, like two guys that have played a lot of football, whether it was at Louisville for Kani Walker and also at Oklahoma, or Dez Malone, who was, I believe, a 2 or 3 year starter at San Diego State, like, that's great experience to have. And then you talk about Jacoby Johnson, who I mentioned at the beginning of the show, who's really starting to show a lot of flashes. Like, that's such a deep room. And so I think the luxury of having a guy like Dez Malone, who was a starter at a solid program a year ago, I get it was a G5, but a solid program, has played a lot of football, to get him to come over and be a rotation guy, I think is huge for Oklahoma. And again, you look at that room, and Gentry Williams is a little banged up right now. Like, Dez Malone's going to have to play a lot, and I think that they want to be able to rotate those corners quite a bit throughout the season, especially early. I think Dez is a guy that you're going to see a lot of throughout the year.
Never a bad thing when you're adding a guy with as much experience as Dez Malone does, particularly at a position like cornerback. It seems like that's something that you would want, somebody that's played a ton, not learning on the fly type of deal. He spoke to the media for the first time, I guess, here in August. We talked to him back in the spring, but here is Dez Malone just talking about the adjustments coming over from San Diego.
The transition it's been smooth. This team is like, the brotherhood is something I've never been a part of before. It's like, it's second to none. I feel like the guys, they really brought me in since day one before I even got here, and I love it here. I love everything about it.
You mentioned the brotherhood. Maybe even on the field, how much more comfortable are you feeling compared to maybe the spring?
Oh, yeah, I feel way more comfortable compared to the spring. When I first got here, I didn't really know what to expect, so I never transferred or anything like that before, so it was kind of different for me. I felt like kind of like a freshman all over again, but, once I got the feel of it, now I feel way more comfortable inside the scheme.
What's the learning curve been like, just spring, digesting defense to now?
I would say now, like, when I first got here, it was kind of a different language. Once I kind of got the terminology down, everything slowed down a little more for me, and I was able to, kind of speak the same language as everybody else around me, and that allowed me to play better within the scheme.
A lot of you guys on this team have come from Group of 5 schools. Mm-hmm. What kind of transition is that? Is it easier than you thought, more difficult? What are the biggest challenges?
I would say, probably it's a little bit more athletes that that are all capable of doing better things on the field, but it isn't a crazy transition for me. I would say I feel like it's confidence is everything. I feel like if you're confident enough to go up against anybody, it really don't matter. But we definitely have a lot of great guys on this team to where like you have to come to work. We have a great group. Like all of our guys, like all of us can go. Like a real good, solid group. We got a little bit of everything. We got all flavors. Like we got speed, we got size, we got smarts, we got everything. I love our group.
What kind of growth have you seen from Jacoby from the spring to now?
Another guy like that with all the athletic ability in the world. Like another guy that's developing really good, and I think he's gonna be great.
Dez Malone played 692 defensive snaps. That was the second most among San Diego State defensive players a year ago, which, I think that counts for something. I don't know what that means in the grand scheme of things, but he's certainly a guy that, when you're talking about that quarterback position, you do have to add Dez Malone into that group.
Let's think about it like this, Eddie. A year ago, Gentry Williams or Woody Washington goes down, and they're throwing out there Makari Vickers and Josiah Wagner. Now, I think both those guys did well in those spots, right? Josiah Wagner now, I believe, at Cal. Makari Vickers still on the team. But you're talking about in big moments last year, they were throwing out true freshmen who've never played college football. And that shows a lot of faith in those guys. But now you're saying, hey, we don't have to throw a true freshman out there. Now, I think they really love Eli Bowen and Jeremiah Newcomb. Like, I think both those guys have performed really well in camp. But you can say, okay, we've got a guy in Dez Malone or Kani Walker who have played a lot of college football and have played some snaps and are smart football players. And sure, they're going to make mistakes because that's what college kids do. But maybe they're less prone to those mistakes because of how much football they've played. So I think that's the difference, right? When you hear the term competitive depth, drink out there. But I think that's what it is. It's like you have guys that not only have talent, but actually have experience, and you're not relying on guys that maybe haven't played a ton of football. While they may be super athletic and super, their football IQs are through the roof and they're going to be great players someday, you do have some guys on this roster that if somebody were to go down, you feel comfortable because they've played a lot of football.
Couple of housekeeping items. If you haven't checked it out, right here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page, a really good interview on the family business this week with the great Dusty Dvoracek. He joined Isaac Stoops as well as Joe Castiglione Jr., kind of talking about Oklahoma's transition to the SEC, and then obviously a lot about Oklahoma's defensive line moving into this season. They were off today, no practice on Thursday. You have Jason White coming up next week for the family business, which will be fantastic.
That's awesome.
And then, they're obviously back onto the practice field on Saturday, which we'll be doing a little bit of reporting. Who knows? I kind of agree with you that might turn into a little bit more of a glorified scrimmage than an actual scrimmage, or a glorified practice than an actual scrimmage. But that's kind of it. They break for preseason camp, and then you start school next week, and all of a sudden you get to the end of next week, and you're talking about a game week the week after.
Yeah, and they'll be game prepping here soon, especially with a short week. I keep forgetting that the first game's on Friday. So really, they'll start game prepping maybe late next week. And then also, I wonder if we'll do media on Sunday. I
don't know how that's
going to
go.
We'll see, but yeah, it's fall camp. It's not over.
Yeah.
They definitely have a couple more practices here, but it's certainly starting to wind down. And like I said, dealing with a little bit of an injury bug, which is normal in fall camp. So I wouldn't be surprised if they hold some guys out, especially guys that what you got in them. There's no need to risk hurting a Danny Stutzman or a Billy Bowman these next few practices before the first game.
It would be kind of interesting, and there's some of those rumors out there that maybe they're going to have to do the injury report going into SEC games. It'd be kind of interesting to see where that injury report would look like if they were to have a game this weekend or maybe even next weekend, right?
Yeah, I wonder if what kind of approach Brent Venables
Yeah.
would take. Just put everybody as questionable on the roster. I wouldn't be shocked if that's the way that...
Just 85 names with questionable out by the side.
It wouldn't shock me if
That'd be
that's the way
amazing.
they approached it.
All right, OU with a scrimmage, the alumni, former player alumni thing coming up on Saturday. We'll kind of see where everything stands, see if they actually do get out there and get after it. But that's going to do it for the practice report today. For George Stoya, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll see you right back here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page.